I didn't have very many friends to begin with, but the ones I did have now left as well.
I still really feel a strong connection to people who have a similar background to me. So if I meet someone who is now an atheist or agnostic, but also grew up in a Christian fundamentalist home, we have this bond that we share.
I built my life around my friendships, so I would have a really hard time if I lost those friendships due to deconversion.
Deconverting has allowed me the opportunity to reconnect with people from my past, friends that I had kind of created distance between, and I have had the opportunity to reconnect with those people, and it's been wonderful.
Welcome to Forsaking Faith, where we tackle these and other thoughts through discussion and contemplation.
This is Heather Bailey and Christine Goodrich. Our podcast explores the journey from fundamentalist Christianity to non-belief by examining the deep and nuanced effects of deconversion.
While some ex-Christians focus on the negative aspects of their past, we want to emphasize how leaving Christianity is a complicated process that brings both pain and joy. It is both loss and liberation. While we lose structure, community, and stability, we gain empowerment and agency.
We want to create a space for thoughtful discussion in this spirit, and we invite you all to join us.
Today we're discussing how deconversion has influenced our attitudes towards our Christian and non-Christian friends. My friends are really varied. I have more non-Christian friends at this point than Christian friends, but I do stay close to all my friends from high school, and I went to a Christian high school, and I'm still relatively close to my friends in high school. I still talk to them at least once a month, definitely, if not more. And so those friends, many of them are still Christians, and I respect their Christianity. I respect their belief. I feel very strongly that they do believe what they believe. And I feel strongly that they have faith that maybe I don't necessarily have. That's the only way I differentiate myself. That's one of the only ways. And I just want to emphasize that in the beginning, that everything I say about my Christian friends, I would like to say with respect. And even if I don't say good things about Christianity, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying bad things about them or what they believe or what they think. It's just, for me personally, it's how it's affected me. So my deconversion process, which I'm sure someday you'll hear the whole thing, but it mostly happened in college, and that was a long time ago. A little longer than I want to admit. No, I'm just kidding. I was pretty active in my basic group, Brothers and Sisters in Christ group. And I was actually the communications chair of that group at the time. And I met my friend. So what was happening when I met this friend is I was introducing an event that Basic was having. And after class, this friend came up to me and said, "Oh, hey, it was cool that you have that event. Let me know how it goes," or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, and so sort of that friendship springboarded into my deconversion. We hung out after that, and we talked, and he asked me if I doubted, and I think one day I just realized that I had, and I had a lot, and sort of that evolved into my deconversion. And we became friends, and I sort of used him. Used is not the right word. He became a figure for me of what it was to not be a Christian and still have a successful and well-rounded life. And I idolized him for a little while, actually, because it was so impressive to me that someone could be so grounded and intelligent and wise. But yeah, I did really respect him for that. So, he was my first No, that's not true. I had a lot of non-Christian friends before. I worked a lot in high school at a local restaurant, at a few local restaurants actually. And many of my friends were non-Christian. I was always the good girl, which is funny because that wasn't true when I was in school. But when I was out of school, I was the good girl. So it was very funny. It was a very interesting line to toe. But I had a lot of diverse friends, wonderful friends that I appreciated, but also set myself apart from in a big way when I was a Christian. I'm now... What? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Can I interject and ask a question? So can you, that's really interesting. And when I get to my part, I'll maybe talk about this too a little bit. When you said setting yourself apart, and can you explain what you mean by that? What do you mean by, I'm friends with these people, but I'm set apart?
Yeah. So I had, if you look me up, I'm not sure you can find it, but I am in the newspaper, our local newspaper. I'm quoted to saying that I don't agree with homosexuality, which is insane because I am bisexual. And I had some really interesting homosexual friends when I was young, and I avidly didn't agree with the way they lived their life, but also appreciated their point of view. I still love them. But that sort of distinction between us, that they embraced a life that I couldn't even think about embracing, was a big distinction between us. And so it didn't just happen with, my homosexual friends. There were a lot of other non-Christian friends that I had. Some of them weren't friends. Some of them were just people who were older than me that liked talking to me because I was a goofy Christian girl. But those friendships didn't stick. It's funny. It's funny that my Christian friendships have stuck the most, but I think it's because they were the closest. Or, I grew up with these people, and we were really close, and so it sort of evolved that way. The people who I talk to about my deep thoughts and my problems are still Christian. And some of them, I really didn't gain any non-Christian friends until college, permanent friends, I would say. Let me scan through them to make sure I'm not insulting anyone at the moment. Yeah, I really don't think so. If I'm missing anyone, I apologize. But it wasn't until I deconverted that I was able to open myself up to people who were non-Christian. Even though I opened up before, it was a different kind of opening. You know what I mean? It was sort of like, maybe I could, show this person the way. Or maybe I could, maybe I'll learn something from them and understand my faith better, or maybe my doubt better, So it was always this inquisitive friendship instead of a deep, loving, close friendship. And I think I've been able to, now I don't feel set apart anymore. I don't feel set apart from Christians, and I don't feel set apart from non-Christians. Now I feel my friendships can be whole. Probably because I feel whole, whereas before I didn't feel as whole, And so I do think that I treat my Christian and non-Christian friends fairly equally. I don't feel like I walk on eggshells with my non-Christian friends, although I am not as avid about my disbelief with them as I am with other people. Because I still think there's place for their belief, and I give that place. But I do think that I haven't changed. I have changed how I treat non-Christians, but I haven't changed how I treat Christians. I sometimes ask my Christian friends how their walk is going, because I still believe that they know. It's so funny. I believe that they know they have a relationship with God. And I think by asking them about their walks, I'm validating their belief. And I think that's okay. It's one of the reasons. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that really demonstrates your maturity, I think, and your well-rounded healthiness as a person, if that makes sense. Like you said, you were using the term whole. And I think that that's really an interesting way of putting it, that because you're sort of more secure in yourself and in your non-belief now, that's actually what has given you this ability to interact with your Christian friends with respect. And that's really admirable. That's something I still struggle with. I think I'm also getting better, and I think I'm getting there, but I don't think I'm there in the way that you are yet. But I would like to be. I think I still have sort of more of I'm still in that place of, like Christians rolling my eyes. I still have those kinds of moments, or just bitterness. So anyway, and maybe I can talk more about that too in a minute when I share my story. But that's just to say, I think it's just that's my goal.
Yeah.
To that point that you're at.
And I mean, I'm always growing, and I will, hopefully stay aware, because I know sometimes you go in and out of like how you treat people can sometimes definitely come from what you believe or what you don't believe. And I really try to make sure that I recognize what they believe first before what I believe. And I think that for me has been a big step for that, So something, another thought that comes to mind when I talk about my friends, especially in high school or in school, I realize now that I always had doubts about my Christian faith. And I think people move in and out of doubt. And that's important to recognize. It's important to recognize that some of our listeners may go back to Christianity. And I want to say that there's no judgment. I don't really think it's important to deconvert people. I do think it's important to make them aware of the reasons why we're not still Christians, because I think that helps them understand where we're coming from, and maybe will help them in their process, right? When I was in high school, I felt like I was out of the loop. And though I set myself apart from non-Christians, I didn't belong in the Christian world. I didn't feel like that was my place and my home, So I always felt like they had a relationship that I didn't have with God, which made me feel like an outsider in the Christian faith too. And so, and I wouldn't say I was jealous of my friends, because that wasn't really the atmosphere. I didn't feel like they thought I didn't belong. I felt like I thought I didn't belong, and of course, there's a little bit of angst and teenagerness in there, but it really was deep for me in terms of not having this beautiful relationship with God that my friends would talk about, and so that transformed over time from this doubt to disbelief. And it really changed how I approached those friends. I think there was this unfairness that they had faith, they had God, and I had to work for it. Essentially it was you, right? Like, you were one of those people. You had faith, you believed, and you knew, and you were good at it. And I was so bad at it, I would love to hear your response to, especially since we knew each other at this time.
Right. Yeah. So it's really interesting that you say that. So I think certainly in some ways that rings true for me, in the sense that I was more, I didn't have those kinds of doubts that you had. And so in that sense, I had more security, or it was more grounded during this time in my life in the church. But what's interesting in me when I hear you say that is that I also struggled with jealousy too, because in a slightly different way, but and I think this is a problem that comes with being part of any close-knit community, which is that there's obviously lots of sort of social interpersonal politics, right, that go on. And so, I don't want to say too many details, but I'll just say that there was certainly a very clear hierarchy. This is my perspective. I don't know, Chrissy, if you feel the same way, but so this is just me speaking for myself. But I felt like there was a very clear hierarchy in our church in terms of who was more called by God, who was more, gifted to serve God, and ways that also still affected me. And, so I remember having thoughts like, how come this person is once again getting a prophecy and I'm not?
Oh yeah, I had that. That was big for me. There was actually a big transitional phase in my life where someone got a prophecy and I was asking God, I was like, I need you to talk to me. And he didn't, and then that was big. That was big. A big moment for me when I was about, I think 13 or 14. So I understand.
Yeah. And especially when those things tended to happen to the same person or, people.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yes. So, then it kind of, that was, right, it's easy for both of us. Both of us are smart people. I mean, you can kind of see through that a little bit and, what is really going on here? Is this really God speaking, or is this a kind of popularity contest where even if it's not, and I'm not saying that in like a cynical way, like not necessarily that the person prophesying is even conscious of that, but that's kind of one of the underlying.
Yeah. And this was, we're talking about friends of ours. The specific friend that I am talking about was really great. She was very humble. She had flaws. She also said, oftentimes like, I don't know why they talk to me, So she wasn't.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so she wasn't like, it wasn't like, it wasn't like she was trying to steal God from me.
Right.
It wasn't like that. It felt like it actually felt like God more than my friends. I didn't have an issue with God. I didn't have an issue with my friends. I had an issue with God. Anyway, I haven't really gotten to hear about yours. So tell me, how have your friendships sort of changed over the course of your deconversion and the way that you treat friendships?
It's interesting. So I had some, as I kind of alluded to earlier, and as I was responding to something that you were saying, Christine, I have a little bit more, I think, complicated feelings about some of the people in, who I was friends with, who continue to be Christians. But it is something that I'm working through, and it is something I think I'm getting much better at this. But I certainly did go through a phase in which and again, we explained this in our introductions and when we introduced ourselves in that podcast, but just to review for listeners, I deconverted much more recently than Christine, so that's part of it. This too, I'm still relatively new to this whole thing, and comparatively, and so I think I'm just earlier on, like I'm at a stage that's earlier, and certainly 2 years ago when I was really first deconverting, I went through the stage I think a lot of people go through, which is that I was just very, very bitter and very angry about a lot of things to do with my background. So I was really angry at my parents. My parents were and still are Christian fundamentalist. So I had anger and bitterness towards them. I had a lot of anger and bitterness towards the church that I grew up in, and towards some of these, not specific individuals. I want to make that clear. I wasn't harboring, anger towards anyone specifically, but just sort of when I thought about that community, I thought about it in very, sort of negative terms. And one of the things that has really changed for me, I would say, especially in the last year, and I think a lot of this is because of the conversations I'm having with Christine and other people around me, I finally feel like that's not the case anymore. So I'm coming out of that place, which is good. And I have more perspective now. I can kind of look back and say there was a lot of beauty in the people that I knew in our church growing up. And for example, there was someone in our church who's still a Christian, a very strong Christian, who is just a very smart woman and has a strength to her that I find really beautiful and not, I don't know if beautiful is the right word, appealing, admirable, that's a better word, admirable. And I can look back and think about this person now and think about those things, in relation to this particular person that I'm thinking of. And that's true for a lot of the people that I interacted with in our church. And to give a specific example, I think one friendship in particular that kind of illustrates this journey that I've been on is with a friend of mine who I'm not gonna, again, I won't say this person's name just to protect their privacy, but this person and I were very, very good friends all through high school and all through my undergraduate college years. And we, again, very close. So we saw each other. There was one summer where he and I and some other people in our friendship group saw each other, 4 to 5 times a week. We were sort of always over at each other's houses, and we connected. One of the ways in which we connected is in that this person's also very intellectual and really likes having deep-rooted conversations, and that's something that's so important to me and to my personality, so we connected in this way. And then we had kind of a falling out for various complicated reasons, but certainly one of them was that I was starting to go down this path of, doubting and then moving away from the faith. And obviously, as Christine also mentioned, we'll probably do a whole separate podcast where we share our deconversion story in detail. So I'm not going to get into details of that, but just to say it was a long process. And this made me really sad. There was a moment in how it affected my friendship with this person. And there was a moment, and I will never forget this, when I was in graduate school for the first time. And I am now in graduate school again for a higher degree. But anyway, and I had this essentially like a meltdown. Maybe that's too dramatic. I had this moment where I was really sad about what had happened, and was like, I really loved this person as a friend. This person was so important to me, and to who he made me who I am in a lot of ways. Not just with the intellectual stuff, but a lot of my loves of just like nerdy things like TV shows and books, like science fiction, fantasy books and things like that, all kind of come from him and his influence. And I was really sad about it, and it felt like such a loss. And so again, this whole podcast is, a lot of what we're doing is talking about how deconversion comes with loss. And for me, I felt that really strongly with this one particular friend. And I, fortunately, one of the goals I kind of, set for myself maybe about 2 years ago is I was like, I'm going to really try to redevelop this friendship or rekindle this friendship with this person. And so we started talking more on social media, and then we actually started calling each other and kind of catching up. And he actually came to visit me a couple of times and for not he was doing he was like in school, but I happened to be where I lived, so he was able to stay with me, and so that was really good. And it's now, so I'm coming back to this place where we can have this friendship, and it's not exactly the same. That's also partly to do with the fact that we don't live in the same state anymore, and he's now married and has other responsibilities. But we do have these phone conversations now, and we always talk about how when we talk on the phone, it feels like nothing's really changed, which I think is really beautiful and really great. And I was back in my hometown this Christmas, actually, and hung out with him and his wife, and it was just so fun. And felt like, again, sort of like nothing had changed.
Yeah.
And that was so cool. That was so encouraging for me, I think, to be able to come back to him and to that friendship. And I'm open with him. He knows that I'm not a Christian anymore, and he is very much a Christian, and he's actually a pastor, so, and has gone to seminary school, and so he's very seriously a Christian. And so to be able to still have that connection with somebody now, even despite the differences in our faith, but to still come back to that initial connection that we had is really cool and really beautiful. And it's a friendship that I think, again, we don't talk all the time, but I think it's a friendship I feel confident about, sort of, that it will continue for at least many years. Oh.
Yeah, I do think that we're in a unique situation in this way. As I'm, well, not exactly. Okay, so I've met some people on Twitter who still have very strong, some of them are still married to people who are Christians. And so there are some that still have that strength in relationship. But then there are a lot of people who are alone. There are a lot of people who are sort of like, well, my family isn't deconverted, and I live in a very strong Christian community, and it can be difficult for some of those people to keep those friendships and still keep themselves. I do think there is a strength in finding yourself. And oh my God, how silly is this? Everybody talks about finding themselves, but sort of, at least in terms of whether or not you believe in God, or whether or not where you place your values and where you place your strength, and maybe, that's sort of what I'm thinking of. As soon as I could feel strong in myself, maybe not finding myself, I think that's something that's constantly changing, but feeling strength in what I believed and what I thought, instead of this doubt and weakness and sort of always being scared of things, helped me to develop my friendships, helped me to grow into my non-Christian relationships and my Christian relationships. You know what I mean? And so I do think that even if you aren't able to talk to your friends about your deconversion, allowing yourself to believe what you actually feel, or allowing yourself to have faith or not have faith, will help you mold your friendships into what they should be. At least for me, that's what happened. And it sounds like, Heather, that's what happened for you. Once you were grounded in not being a Christian anymore, you were able to open yourself up to being friends with these Christians who probably didn't have a problem with you at all,
Right. Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think like the not being grounded is what leads to the paranoia of like, all these people hate me now, right? All these Christians think I'm a terrible person. And right. Yeah. And I think, and man, this is such a good
Sure.
more broadly,
Yeah.
like a good life lesson, I suppose. It doesn't just apply to what we're talking about, which is just, yeah, if you know who you are and you feel secure and confident and happy in who you are, then you're going to be able to be more open to lots of different kinds of relationships.
Yeah, but specifically related to deconversion, I do think that for me, when you're in doubt, you offer less to your friends, and so you feel less confident that you're giving something to the relationship because you're always questioning and you're always, there's no ground to stand on, there's nothing to leap off of, And Christians talk about the leap of faith all the time, and maybe this is sort of a leap of self, It's sort of, oh, wow, now I have something to jump to, I'm not, like the leap of faith is, taking a leap when you don't know if you can land. But I've been able to see where I can land now. So like I don't need that faith anymore because I have self to land on. I have, which is like so like fruity tooty,
It's true. Yeah.
But I do sort of,
and like you were saying, I think that our Christian friends, that gives us, like you said, like something a way into coming back to our friendships with Christians. Because we have that sense of being grounded, and so do they. They're grounded in a different way. Yes. But two people who are grounded are going to, be able to connect in ways that people who aren't are just not going to be able to.
Right. And, and there's one last thing I want to highlight, and I know I've actually talked the majority of the time, but, I know, sorry. But is my friendship with Heather has been a key part of this deconversion process, simply because before Heather, I didn't have someone to talk to about it. I had my Christian friends who I didn't keep it hidden from them, but I wasn't entirely open. And I'm not saying I'm not speaking in half-truths. They just knew I had sort of strayed, and that was a thing. Christine's kind of strayed, but she may still have a relationship with God. And I still sort of speak like I have a relationship with God when I talk to them. Not because I just give God place. Like I was saying, I give their beliefs place. I give their God place, And so, but Heather and I have come to a place where we can actually discuss these things, and it's transformative, in terms of being able to find a space where you can discuss and debate and think about your deconversion, because a lot of the deconversion is turning your mind on to things that you weren't allowed to before. Not that you couldn't think about them, but that there was always a rebuttal, and doing that alone is really difficult, it's stressful, and it's sleep depriving. And so when you have someone and you can release these thoughts and you can share these thoughts with them, it makes it a lot easier process. And so that's sort of why we're here. We're here to hopefully be a sounding board for people who don't have a sounding board. And we may not be able to take the time to talk to everyone individually, but hopefully we can reach people through our podcast, and we'll do our best to respond to emails and to help people through, or at least, help people find other people, I think that's a big part of why we're here is friendship. Definitely. Is one of the main pieces.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. This podcast idea came from Christine and I just talking a lot about our experiences, and then wishing that we had more people to talk to and wishing that there was more of a community. And then we said, well, instead of sitting around and wishing for it, why don't we do something about it? Why don't we try to become that community?
Definitely. So if you are wanting to reach out, our email is forsakingfaith@gmail.com. We're at Twitter at forsakingfaith, and we are on Facebook right now as Forsaking Faith. You can find our page, and we'll do our best to get back to you and respond to you, and just know you're not alone. So saying that, thank you for listening. We really appreciate your time.
At the end of every podcast, Heather and I are going to share a thought, a poem, or some sort of artistic expression of the deconversion journey from either our listeners or ourselves. So Heather's going to start us off today with a poem called Dry Bones.
Dry bones. I go into the desert and God tells me to prophesy to a pile of dry bones. I speak his words and the bones join together. Sinew meets bone and flesh knits to flesh. They become men, rising with life from the underworld. God tells me that with this army he will restore our people. But all I see are more soldiers doomed to return to the same dust. I look towards home, turning my eyes away from his brittle promise.